Are we heading into a post-literate society? I have a whole bunch of news articles talking about this, linked in the description below. But just anecdotally, I would say that I've seen signs of it. Like anybody my age, I know people with kids. It depends on how the kids are being raised, what they're being taught. But for sure, there is a lot more screen time. Kids like to hang out on tablets. If they have access to phones, they've got that. VR headsets, and so forth. This isn't just about kids. Adults, too, are spending more time watching videos on YouTube, TikTok, and so forth, and I think reading less. Growing up in high school, I think a lot of my peers in high school and college and even middle school were big-time readers, and I'm not seeing that anymore or as much among my peer group now at my current age. I'm a writer, and I vend my books at Comic-Cons and other conventions, and when people walk past my booth, a lot of times they'll be my age or even younger, and they'll just kind of apologetically say, "Oh, I don't really read, I don't like books." It's all ages, okay? I'm not going to say it's any particular age group. It's not any particular generation. The American public is reading less, and I genuinely think this is a truth. The articles are scare articles, and so they're going to try to make it sound worse than it is, probably. But just looking around, talking to people, I think we can all agree that even if people are reading the news on their phones or their tablets, they're not reading books as much anymore. So I've always been a reader and a writer. Going all the way back to early childhood, I loved reading and writing. I still do. I'm a person that likes the written word. There are kind of voracious, as they say, whale readers where they just read thousands of books per year. I think that that's just about impossible, for me at least. I would say that I read about 50 to 70 books per year. I keep track of it on Goodreads. My Goodreads link is in my profile below. So you might ask, why does this matter? And I'm not a fan of the people that get dismissive about this. I think it is an important thing that we're losing in society. Not just because, I make my livelihood as a writer. I actually don't. I have a day job. And not just because, I wish everybody was enjoying the same media I like to enjoy. I don't think everyone has to enjoy the same things, of course not. But when you pick up, let's say, a nonfiction book, you are getting a certain intimate voice in your head, a perspective about something. You're kind of concentrating on it for a long period of time. And there's usually a lot more interesting knowledge with a lot of connections made, more than you're going to get by reading an article, more than you get by skimming Wikipedia. Not all books are created equal. There are definitely very boring, dry textbooks that are hard to get through, but there are well-written nonfiction books that are exciting to read. I've definitely found them, and I know my taste. Another problem is that there's a sheer glut of content. It's there with videos, it's there with books. There's 11,000 books published per day on Amazon. Nobody has time to sift through all that, of course. I'm grateful anytime an undiscovered gem gets discovered. They are hard to find. You do have to sift. I am a big believer that what you see put on the shelves in libraries and bookstores is only the tip of an iceberg, and it's not the best tip in my opinion. What you're seeing are the big bestsellers, the very, very trendy things. Now, things that have a lot of money and power thrown behind them to make them get high up on the bestseller list, to be very visible to the public, by definition, in this day and age, they're going to be something that was low risk, not that controversial, something that the sellers believe is going to sell. It follows the data that shows that other stuff like this has sold. And so by definition, it's not going to be something breakout or trend setting. It's going to be something that follows trends. Another factor is in schools and so forth, there's kind of a big focus on the classics, classic literature. I do believe classics are worth reading. They have their place for sure. I think that sometimes it takes an academic mindset to really glean the fullness of what a book of classic literature is telling you, because you have to put it in the context of the time it was written in. And to be frank, most children do not have that context. I think that shoving classics down the throat of young children who aren't interested, who don't think that it speaks to them, that's one of the major problems that we've got with turning kids off to reading, and specifically kids. If I had to judge books based only on the classics that I was told to read in school, I think I would have stopped reading as well. I do understand that sometimes the classics have worked well for certain people. Certain people make a really great, strong connection with their teacher, and they grow to love Shakespeare, they grow to love Jane Eyre or Edith Wharton, Alexandre Dumas. Some of the classics, in my opinion, like some of the ones that I've connected to the most, have been by Alexandre Dumas and H.G. Wells. But when it comes to Charles Dickens, I had trouble, and a lot of other people did as well. These classics were popular in their time, in their era, but they weren't being taught in schools in that era. They weren't forced upon young children. They were popularized by the readers of the time. Just like popular movies of the 1980s, some of them were sleeper hits, like The Princess Bride was, I think, a flop in the theaters, and later on it became very popular. It found its mark, it found its audience. It wasn't something that was top-down taught in schools. It was something that was bottom-up, discovered by the public. There are new voices in literature in that same vein today. They're mostly buried beneath the big bestsellers, I would say. Some of them don't really get noticed until there's a movie deal or the author has repeatedly made movie deals. And older generations tend to say, oh, it doesn't really speak to me. I don't really understand it. Of course, it's not speaking to you. It's speaking to the readers of today. It's a question of relevancy. I have found some connection or some relevancy in some of the classics, but it's rare. When you're reading something, you're like, oh, that is just like society today. Oh yeah, I definitely see that. Or wow, I've definitely talked to family members that had that outlook. And the further away you get from our current moment in time, the harder it is to find that relevancy, to find that connection. But I don't want to just harp on schools. Curriculum makers, publishers themselves are selecting and choosing. And I've had a couple of other videos on this topic already. One is called The Male Reading Crisis, and I believe there's another one as well, and I'll link to it below. Now, having read a lot of history, there is a thing where every era thinks that they're the ones living in the end times, or they're the ones that are at peak civilization, and nothing more is possible. And I've seen some of this rhetoric, unfortunately, from writers. Lots of writers are saying, all the ideas have been had, all the original stories have been told, and there's nothing more. I find that such a depressing way to look at things, and it's a rampant belief right now. I strongly disagree with that. I don't believe all the stories have been told. I believe lots more have not seen the light of day. I believe with 11,000 books published per day, there's at least a few in there that would probably blow your mind. They're just going to be almost impossible to find. I've taken a deep dive into the rabbit hole of web serial fiction. It's not for everyone. It is definitely a certain type of taste. But I find new stories or fresh ideas being thrown around in there, along with a lot of derivative dreck. As somebody who reads a lot, I find it somewhat easy to avoid the ultra derivative stuff. I can look at the blurb, I can size up the author, I can size up the way the book is written, and I usually can tell pretty quickly that, oh, this is not going to be something that I'm going to find anything original in, or this is just a repeat of a rehash of a remake, and I'm not interested. I think there are other browsers that are finding it much harder. On the other side of that, there's young readers for whom it's all new. And I do think that indeed some of the remakes and rehashes that are kind of updated for today's audiences do help with that a little bit. They help bring new readers in. I don't want to be down on other forms of entertainment and media. I come from the video game industry. I have a lot of respect for video games and gamers. My husband is one. I respect people that read manga, that watch anime, that prefer TV and film. All of these mediums for storytelling are wonderful in their own way. They've all got something. And I do believe there are people that genuinely, fervently prefer a certain kind of format. I'm not going to say people with dyslexia, because I do know dyslexic people that love to read and they read audiobooks. I know someone who's blind who reads just voracious amounts of audiobooks. I wouldn't say that you're limited by physical ability in order to read books, but there are people that genuinely just prefer the visual medium or things like that. However, I really don't think that's the vast majority of people. I think what happens is people get turned off to reading. Young, in childhood mostly, sometimes as older people. I think sometimes they might have enjoyed reading as children, and then all they find are like the big, popular, bland, best-selling books in the airports and in the Barnes & Noble, and they're not able to find something that really speaks to them anymore, and they try and try again, and eventually they just stop. They stop looking. And I think that's a tragedy. That's just awful. There are good books out there for them, they're just not finding them. Likewise, I know somebody who hated books growing up. You know, like any school child, he was forced to read the classics. None of them spoke to him. Then, as an adult, he discovered The Wheel of Time, which is one of my favorite series, and it just roped him right into reading sci-fi and fantasy just voraciously. He started a publishing company. I mean, it's just incredible how like 10 or 12 bad experiences with books can turn you off to them forever. I think I heard somewhere that to get addicted to something, you have to be exposed to it 14 times. And so I think, 14 good books, you're addicted like I am. But perhaps it goes in the other direction as well. I can well imagine that even 2 or 3 bad experiences with books would be enough to just stop someone from reading. And I would say, okay, even me, and I do love books, but if I read 3 or 4 kind of very boring, bland ones in a row, I'll switch to podcasts for a while, just so I have something entertaining to listen to when I can't find that in a book. Getting back to the value of books and literature, what it is you've got a single creator, a solo creator, and that's a whole different ballgame. A solo creator is very different from a team of 500 people. I think an example of this would be the Game of Thrones. So a lot of people just loved the Game of Thrones TV show because of just how well that story was crafted. What you had was a visionary writer, a single writer who wasn't being tripped up by a room full of yes men or a room full of other writers throwing ideas back and forth. It's one creator. The show later fell off the rails when it outpaced the books, and you can see, okay, the directors, the showrunners, the actors, none of them were really directing that story. None of them really had an idea of how to end it well. The vision was lost. The power of that vision is just so compelling. Reading a good book is just a very immersive experience. You're experiencing the worldview of somebody else. And if they're a good storyteller, an entertaining communicator, they've got the pacing down and all that, and character growth, it can just be incredibly far more immersive than any TV or movie. Beyond that, writing is the medium of history. It's how, through the ages, humans have communicated across generations to each other. I think that a silly 5-minute video, if it's viewed by somebody 500 years from now, they might not understand any of the references, any of the relevance. It might be in a language they don't understand. Whereas books, usually you get into somebody's mind. There's something called inner monologue. A good writer of nonfiction is going to be clearly communicating why this and that matters. They're going to be communicating their intimate appraisal of ideas, their opinions. And I believe that can translate dozens of generations later, maybe 100 generations later. I mean, people still praise biblical myths that were written well before the Roman Empire. Writing also gives a voice to the voiceless, to people that, for whatever reason are marginalized, or to people that don't have a lot of power in society, whether it's a marginalized group of people, somebody that's politically targeted, or even children or elderly people, just people that normally wouldn't be listened to. When people like that communicate from their soul, from their heart, I think it can reach the public in ways that change society, change huge amounts of people's minds. It's something that shouldn't be ignored and dismissed. We are definitely in an age of rehashes, remakes, and people that are terrified to venture forth and risk a new idea. All the incentives go towards copy, copy, copy. Publishers want comp titles that are no more than 2 to 5 years old, meaning compare it to something else that was published within the last 2 to 5 years. Nothing older than that. Prominent indie authors say things like, copy your favorite story and change just one little thing about it and now it's yours. I find these bits of advice to be depressing, and I don't agree with them. If that's all they want to do to make it a quick cash grab, there are easier ways to make money, and why are they doing this? Overall, I don't believe literature is doomed or that it's going to die off. I think there's always going to be some people like me, just crazy people that love to read. So I'm really not worried that, books are just going to vanish forever. But I do think a society that devalues books, devalues originality, is in trouble. If you've always found reading difficult, I'm going to beg you to get out of your comfort zone. Look for some books that are well outside the normal places you look. Maybe go to Reddit, ask for recommendations on Suggest Me a Book, something like that. If you're in school, try reading something other than the classics. If you're only reading sci-fi and fantasy, try reading some historical nonfiction that's also about war and injustice, something like that. I think just reading outside your comfort zone, reading widely, can open up a whole new world for you. And if you believe that all the stories have been told and originality is dead, I would say you're not looking hard enough. You're not looking in the right places. If you are only picking up the bestsellers that are promoted to you in ads on Amazon and on shelves in Barnes & Noble and in the libraries, look elsewhere, please. Like I said, go to Reddit, find reading clubs, reading groups. Go to indie bookstores and see what they have newly stocked. If you read manga, maybe try some web serial fiction. You might just be blown away. And since I've read at least 5,000 books in my lifetime, feel free to ask me for recommendations. So that's all I've got to say, and happy reading.